The sky over Beijing was overcast that humid late afternoon. The moisture clung to the skin, traffic roared, and the rush of people seemed to ignore everything outside their path. In the midst of this frantic routine, Kwame, a young African man recently arrived from Ghana, stepped off the subway for the first time on Chinese soil. He carried a simple suitcase and the shine in his eyes of someone who had fought hard to get there. He was in China for a series of meetings with investors. Fluent in English, French, and even attempting Mandarin with a heavy accent, Kwame was an entrepreneur who had overcome many barriers. His educational app, aimed at African youth, was already impacting thousands back in his home country. But that evening, he wasn't a CEO, a speaker, or a special guest. He was just a tired man in slacks and a wrinkled shirt, looking for dinner. As he walked into a luxurious restaurant in Sunliton, he was met only with sideways glances. The place was modern, filled with wealthy young people and Western tourists, all dressed elegantly and absorbed in their phones and refined meals. Kwame approached the counter and, in simple Mandarin, asked for a table. The hostess didn't respond. Immediately, she looked him up and down as if he didn't belong there. "We're full," she said coldly, without even checking the system. Kwame looked around. At least 3 tables were clearly empty. "Doesn't look full to me," he replied politely. She then ignored him, turned and went to greet a white couple who had just walked in. With a rehearsed smile, she offered them a large table with a street view. Kwame took a deep breath. This wasn't the first time he had faced prejudice outside Africa, but it still stung just as much. He walked over to one of the empty tables, sat down in silence, and waited for minutes. No waiter approached him. Other guests stared. Some whispered. A child pointed at him and was quickly scolded. Kwame pulled out his phone, opened a translation app, and typed, "I'd like to order a traditional dish from the house, please." When a waiter finally passed by, Kwame showed him the message. The man looked at the phone, frowned, and said, "You don't understand. This is a fine restaurant. Maybe you want another place." That's when Kwame did what he always did when underestimated. He smiled. "Then bring me the most expensive dish," he said in English, looking the man in the eye. "And a wine to go with it." The waiter hesitated, then nodded without expression. He returned a few minutes later with the menu, but even with his order placed, the stares kept piercing through him. Kwame ate in silence. He watched, he thought, and he smiled. He already knew exactly what he would do next. The luxurious restaurant slowly emptied as the night advanced. Conversations echoed under the golden light of the chandeliers, forks, scraped porcelain plates, and expensive laughter filled the air. Kwame, still alone at his table, had already finished his meal. He hadn't spoken another word to the staff. His calm gaze observed everything. When the waiter finally returned with the bill, he did so with forced courtesy. "Your bill, sir," he said, placing it on the table without making eye contact. Kwame opened it. The amount was high, very high, not just for the food. The wine chosen was one of the most expensive on the menu, and the dessert, recommended by the chef, added even more. Kwame smiled again. He pulled out a black card, an exclusive, limited edition, card reserved for ultra-high net worth individuals. The waiter's expression changed. But it was too late. Kwame didn't just pay for his own meal. He looked up and in English said calmly, "I want to pay the bill for everyone here tonight." The waiter blinked, confused. "Excuse me, every table, everything, include it all." There was a moment of silence. The manager was called, then another. Staff gathered. Some customers began to notice something strange was happening. "Are you sure, sir?" the manager asked, adjusting his tie. Kwame nodded. "Just make sure to include a message on each table's receipt." He pulled out his phone and typed, "Next time, greet everyone with dignity. You never know who's at your table." He handed it to the manager. The staff froze. Kwame stood up, adjusted his simple blazer, and walked to the door. As the waiters began delivering receipts to each table, all showing zero cost and including the same message, a wave of shock spread through the room. Some gasped, others looked around, searching for the man who had just taught them a silent lesson. At that point, the hostess recognized the weight of her mistake, and the waiter who had refused him service lowered his head in shame. But Kwame was already gone. That same night, still buzzing from the shock, a young couple seated at one of the side tables, tourists from Australia, posted a photo of the receipt they had received with the mysterious message, "Next time, greet everyone with dignity. You never know who's at your table." The post went viral in less than 2 hours, across platforms like Weibo, Twitter, and Instagram. People speculated about the identity of the man in the simple blazer who paid for dozens of luxury meals without saying a single word of anger. They described him as the calm stranger, the millionaire teacher, and even the African gentleman. Videos from security cameras began circulating. Though blurry, one thing was clear. His elegance was not in his clothes, but in his attitude. One comment on Weibo read, "We were at the table next to him. He didn't complain. He just observed. I feel ashamed for not having stood up." Another, in English, read, "This man did what no tweet could do. He made people reflect with silence and action." Soon, major Chinese news portals began sharing the story. The mystery deepened when a reporter tried to identify the man and discovered that he was no ordinary traveler. Kwame Owusu, CEO of a tech startup based in Accra, had been featured on Forbes Africa's 30 Under 30. His work in education and digital inclusion had already impacted thousands of children across Ghana, Nigeria, and Kenya, but he had never used his title that night. Not once had he mentioned who he was. He had let their prejudice speak first. And then, with kindness and generosity, he had answered in the only language they truly understood, respect and money. By the next morning, the restaurant, once praised as a gem of sophistication in the heart of Shanghai, had become the center of a global controversy. Review platforms were flooded with negative ratings. The once 5-star reputation crumbled. Hour by hour, people weren't just angry about poor service, they were furious about the disrespect. Screenshots of the security footage circulated worldwide, showing waiters ignoring Kwame, the cold body language, the dismissive glances. In a press conference hastily arranged, the restaurant manager, the same man who had handed the final receipts, appeared visibly shaken. "We deeply regret the events that occurred," he said. "We are reviewing our internal policies, and we offer our sincerest apologies to Mr. Owusu." But the public didn't accept apologies so easily. Petitions appeared online demanding mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all restaurant staff. Influencers and business people weighed in, stating that this wasn't an isolated incident, but a reflection of a more broader problem. How society treats those who don't look the part. One powerful post said he wore no expensive watch, no branded suit, and because of that they saw nothing. We must stop judging worth by appearance. Despite all the outrage, Kwame remained silent. He didn't tweet. He didn't do interviews. He didn't post a single word about the night, and that silence only made the message louder. 2 days later, when the storm on the internet began to cool, a letter appeared on the official website of Kwame's company. It was titled simply, "To those who choose to see." It read, "I didn't grow up with wealth. I grew up with wisdom, the kind that teaches you to see people, not labels. That night in the restaurant, I was reminded that money can open doors, but character is what changes minds. I paid the bill not to shame, but to awaken. Some may say I overreacted. Others may say I was too soft, but I believe in actions that echo. If one person thinks twice before ignoring someone because of how they look or where they're from, then it was worth every cent. To those who ignored me, I forgive you. To those who watched in silence, I hope next time you speak. And to those who welcomed this story with reflection, thank you. You are the reason I keep believing. The letter ended without a signature, just a small symbol at the bottom. The Earth. The message quickly became a manifesto. Teachers printed it and read it in classrooms. Companies shared it internally. As a lesson in leadership, community centers in cities across China, the US, and parts of Africa hosted open talks on unconscious bias and cultural respect, all inspired by one man, one meal, and one silent lesson. 2 days later, when the storm on the internet began to cool, a letter appeared on the official website of Kwame's company. It was titled simply, "To those who choose to see." It read, "I didn't grow up with wealth. I grew up with wisdom, the kind that teaches you to see people, not labels." That night in the restaurant, I was reminded that money can open doors, but character is what changes minds. I paid the bill not to shame, but to awaken. Some may say I overreacted. Others may say I was too soft, but I believe in actions that echo. If one person thinks twice before ignoring someone because of how they look or where they're from, then it was worth every cent. To those who ignored me, I forgive you. To those who watched in silence, I hope next time you speak. And to those who welcomed this story with reflection, thank you. You are the reason I keep believing. The letter ended without a signature, just a small symbol at the bottom. The Earth. The message quickly became a manifesto. Teachers printed it and read it in classrooms. Companies shared it internally. As a lesson in leadership, community centers in cities across China, the US, and parts of Africa hosted open talks on unconscious bias and cultural respect, all inspired by one man, one meal, and one silent lesson. Weeks passed. The story faded from headlines, but not from hearts. In Shanghai, whispers of the African millionaire who paid for everyone became a legend, told by waiters to new hires as a reminder. Never judge too quickly. At that same restaurant, Table 9, the one where Kwame had sat, became quietly known as the reflection table. Guests who reserved it would often ask to read a copy of the letter, now framed on the wall. Some even left their own notes behind. Messages of apology, gratitude, change. In Accra, Kwame continued his work, funding rural schools, launching digital literacy programs, mentoring young entrepreneurs. When asked in a private interview why he never spoke to the press about the restaurant incident, he smiled and replied, "I wasn't the story. They were. I just held up a mirror." His calmness, his grace, and his choice to teach through action rather than anger became a blueprint for silent resistance and powerful transformation. And though he returned to Shanghai months later, he never visited that restaurant again, but in a way, he never needed to. Because the meal he shared, not of food, but of awareness, was still being served. One table, one act, one man. Ignored for speaking his truth, but remembered forever for the way he answered it.